You've probably heard of the concept of a sunk cost. What a sunk cost is an expenditure that you've already made that cannot be recovered. These kinds of costs should not be considered when making a decision. So if you've already incurred a cost and there's nothing you can do about the cost you've already incurred, then there's nothing you should not be factoring that cost into your decision. So an example might be if you've spent money on some specialized equipment that has no value to anyone else and you can't sell it, well, you shouldn't factor that in when you're making further decisions. So let's take an example. Let's say you buy a piece of land and that land costs you $300,000. Recession hits, property values decline, the land is now only worth $200,000. Now the money you've lost on this land is what we would call a sunk cost. So this $100,000 that you've lost, you paid $300,000, it's now worth $200,000. That difference, $100,000, is sunk cost. Now let's say you could choose to build a factory on this land for $20,000, and that once you've built this factory, the land would actually be worth $260,000. Should you build this factory? Well, yes, you should. By building the factory, you're going to end up with something that is $40,000 more, worth $40,000 more to you than if you didn't. Why? Because the value that you get is $260,000. The cost is the $200,000, which is the current value of the land, and the $20,000 of construction cost. So $220,000. So the extra value you get is $40,000, which is a positive number, so you should build this factory. If instead of the $200,000 you had considered the $300,000 that you originally paid for it, then you would have, this calculation, if you put here at $300,000 instead, you'll find that you're coming up with a $60,000 loss. So this is going to tell you not to build the factory. But that's the wrong decision, because you're better off than where you are to build the factory. You're better off by $40,000 as opposed to not building the factory. So by considering the sunk cost, you would come to the wrong decision and say, this is going to give me a $60,000 loss as opposed to a $40,000 profit. And so you would make the wrong decision if you included the sunk cost in your decision making. That's why we ignore sunk costs in decision making.